What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Hollywood Already Did It, your weekly movie podcast for things that have been rebooted, adapted, changed into another medium, or basically ideas that have been done and are going to be done again and again and again and again forever. As always, I'm your host, Blake Schultz, and with me is my co-host, Terrence Tatum.
Hello, everyone.
And joining us today is an old friend of mine from college. I'm super excited to have her, Jamie Jirak of comicbook.com. How are you, Jamie?
Oh, I'm so good. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming. I'm so happy. We haven't seen each other in so long, and we're going to have some of the same conversations we had in that Screenwriting 1 class all those years ago. And we are once again at a week when there are no theaters. COVID-19 is still out there. However, we have been blessed by another chance to see a great television show. If you're on HBO Max, the Harley Quinn show has come out. Now more people can watch it, and they should, and that's what we're going to talk about today.
Yes.
Jamie, do you want to start us off? What did you think of this show?
Oh my God, I love it. So I have a confession, and it's that I didn't really get into Harley Quinn until this year when Birds of Prey came out. That movie changed my life. I saw it 4 times in theaters. It's easily my favorite DC movie, maybe after Batman and Robin. but I loved it so much, and I wanted a Harley Quinn kick. And I saw that the cartoon existed, so I got the DC Universe free trial, and the rest is history.
It's so funny you bring up Batman and Robin with Birds of Prey, because after I watched it, I also was like, I think this is my favorite DCEU movie. It might even compete with Batman 89 or The Dark Knight, which I know a lot of people will be like, well, The Dark Knight, but it's great. These are all great movies for different reasons, but I really felt that Gotham had never looked better than it did in Birds of Prey, dating back to like Schumacher's Gotham. I was like, I kind of miss when we weren't really afraid to make things look comic booky. Like
It's
you go
fun. It's bright. It's colorful.
Quirky.
I'm not here for the broody DC. I know that that's like more true to a lot of the comics, but I like Uma Thurman's Poison Ivy, Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman, and Margot Robbie's Birds of Prey are just like the holy trinity to me. Let's just get these women going unhinged, being awesome. That's all I want.
Yeah, it's very much the return to form that I was hoping we'd get with Robert Pattinson's Batman. And they were like, no, it's going to be even darker than The Dark Knight. And I was like, but why?
Let's just turn off all the lights. There will be nothing you can see here.
I want the yellow emblem. I want big blue ears. I want gauntlets. And I want to get some comic book villains that aren't just mobsters from a thrown away Scorsese script. Let's get back to some colorful Gotham. Terrence, you just watched the show.
I did.
And I was so excited for you to watch
it. Talk to me. I didn't do the DC Universe stuff just because there was the majority of DC at this point in time I was not a fan of. I caught most of Titan season 1 and I did enjoy that, but I was like, this is not enough for me to justify buying an entire network. So I didn't. But the second that thing hit HBO Max, because everyone was talking about it, I was like, well, let me burn through this. And the opening line of the first episode, I was like, oh, white people on a boat talking about I'm sold. Like this is amazing. I'm in. Let's do this. Let's take me through this gauntlet. I watched that within about a 48-hour period. I went through the entire series, both seasons, and I loved every moment of it. Anytime you can do an adult version of DC where you're taking characters that like a lot of people have forgotten about or like in the underbelly of DC that don't really mean that much and give them an entire arc or give them beats, I'm all in. I have that sick, twisted sense of humor, but also at the same time, give me heart and make me actually sometimes tear up and like start welting a little bit. I'm like, oh, then this is, I'm in. I'm sold. This is from top to bottom one of my favorite things that I've ever seen DC do within the last like decade. And this is including Dark Knight, which I love.
Oh, Harley Quinn. Dark Knight.
Yeah.
Oh, this is all audio. My hands were very far apart.
There's a lot of space there. Batman and Robin 8 more times. The Poison Ivy movie with Uma Thurman that we never got. but I like to pretend we have.
Yeah.
God, I'm like, we could just talk about that movie. I just
Oh my
rewatched
God.
it the other day.
I mean,
It was like, this is great, kind
I
of.
find myself constantly just being like, just out of nowhere, just saying, like I told Lady Freeze when I pulled her plug, this is a one-woman show.
There was no reason to do that.
I loved all the scenery that Uma Thurman was chewing up in that movie because I was like, I'm here for it. This is great. I like what she's doing, and I want more of it.
I also like, I'm a sucker for action figures, and if you can be like, we made a movie that's incredibly toyetic, I'm like, yep, that's fine.
Yeah.
Let's make a full 6-inch scale of all of these. I'll buy them. That's also how I felt immediately after Harley Quinn, as I was like, where I gotta buy something. And
there's so many collectibles just within this series. I
and
want
they,
that. I
they're
want that.
behind crazy paywalls on the DC app. And I feel like we will not be able to talk about this show without talking about this DC app that is now slowly eroding into HBO Max.
Yes. I wrote about that today at work, and it's like, because they on Facebook, the Harley Quinn and Titans Facebook pages changed their names from DCU's Harley Quinn to just DC's Harley Quinn.
Yeah.
And it could be because it's now also on HBO Max and they're trying to make it, but I don't know. I think
that's very much figuring out you were dumped on Facebook. That to me is very much like you go online and you're like, what do you mean she had a relationship with that exchange?
Yeah.
And your friends know about it before you do.
Yeah, I mean, like they've already transported Doom Patrol over. Harley Quinn's over there now. I think the last one is Titans. I know season 3 is going to be on both. They might as well just go ahead and put season 1 and 2 on there too. Like they're basically shutting things down at DC Universe.
The only thing that sucks is that I don't utilize this feature, I'll be honest. But the fact that DC Universe has the comics,
yeah,
it sucks that's what people will be losing. Television wise, yeah, HBO Max will have it. It's fine.
Right.
But that is a bummer.
Yeah, it's such a weird model because when it started, I was at the Comic-Con event that announced Harley Quinn, and they had their big outside museum, and you could see everything, and there was the Swamp Thing maze, and at the end of it, the guy was like, would you like to sign up for DC for, whatever it was, $50, $80 for the year? And I very much said, no, because I want to see what this does, because I've been fooled before whenever there's a new app, and I think I'm going to turn it on and have everything, and I don't.
I still don't have HBO Max because I can't get it on the Roku, and I refuse to watch TV on my computer.
The only reason I got it because they just added the PS4 app like a week ago. PS4 wasn't a part of their thing, and they just did an update for it, and it's still a wonky, like it's not 100%. So
it moves very slow, but it plays Harley Quinn.
That's all I need,
which I loved. I also discovered it in quarantine. We had a friend staying with us due to some housing issues, and he had the DC app and was like, you got to watch it. And I said, I want to wait for HBO because we have to all watch it so we get season 3, but we burned through it in 2 days. And I cannot remember the last time I had to pause a show to go back because I kept missing jokes, laughing too hard. And the way it's so amazing to me because I feel like what keeps happening in the DCEU and a lot of things DC tries to do is they just miss the point of some of these characters. We're going to make Superman big and brooding and put on this Christopher Nolan can of paint that we had left over from the Dark Knight trilogy, and it's going to be very sad. And then Joss Whedon's going to make it too comedic, and then we're just not going to figure it out until Wonder Woman and Aquaman and Birds of Prey. And then you have a show that does not care about its continuity. It doesn't care about being part of this universe, but these characters feel so much more real and so much more fulfilled. When you even just start off the show with Harley's urgency to be like noticed and seen beyond this relationship and work her way up in this supervillain world, it's so weird that I'm like, how did they nailed it so well here?
Yeah.
How was no one else doing this? But also, I was
the relationships and like the way that Harley's arc in terms of growing and just can we talk about spoilers? Are we trying to?
Let's do it. Full on spoilers. You've been warned.
So as a queer woman myself, seeing a queer relationship like that develop, but also they did it in such a good way that like you believe that in the first season that they're just friends and that they've never really thought about it before. And it never felt forced. It was such Harley grew into the person that would be able to have this relationship.
Yeah.
And you don't get to see that kind of growth, especially with queer characters.
It felt very organic. I do like that the first season they spent the entire first season basically she had to grow and get out of the situation that was the Joker. Like that was what that season was about. Like, okay, we'll establish this relationship with him, but we won't force this relationship because that's not where her brain, she's not mentally stable to do that part yet. She needs to fix herself with Mr. J first. Then the second episode, the second season, we started working on that. I love, because one of my favorite characters ever, Blake, we know how much I love him, is Mr. Freeze. I love him to death. And the fact that his episode was sort of the impetus that started her awakening to like, oh my God, this man sacrificed himself for his wife. I've never loved someone like that.
I
think I might. I think I might love someone like that. I just don't know how to tell that person. And then my heart broke, and then just seeing the episodes, and they're smart. Some of these episodes ended with no sound. Like they would just drop the sound out. There would be no sound as they close off the episode. You just sit there in sadness. You're like, oh my God, Harley. I hope
really
you find
was.
love. I hope this happens for you.
It's when Poison Ivy says something along the lines of like, I trust you with my life, but I don't trust you with my heart. Oh, knife.
Yeah.
The same way, I just read Heroes in Crisis, the DC book, which has a lot of Ivy and Harley in it. And I'm now reading it in their voices the same way that I've heard Kevin Conroy for Batman and Mark Hamill for the Joker. And Ivy especially, watching her, because you bring up the queer relationship, which I want to talk about just so much, which is challenging for me to do because I'm a straight white man. So all I can do is be like, it was great. I've never experienced this. But seeing it done so organically, even watching representation happen that isn't your representation is super important. And when it happens this way and it feels so natural and organic, but the relationship they get it is so supportive, a small part of me was like, I'm so jealous of what these two women have. I've never had a relationship where I'm just dating my best friend. Look how much they care about each other. But the way they kind of like, there was no big coming out sequence. We didn't have to deal with any like old Chasing Amy tropes of seeing it through the eyes of like Ben Affleck, or seeing, oh, well, one of us has come out, but the other one hasn't told our parents, and it's all going to be fine. They're accepting her this. It just was. And it felt like kind of what I assume it is what the goal is to get to, that all of these things just feel natural and organic, and watching her try to kind of show Ivy who she is the same way that Ivy showed her who she was in season 1 was awesome.
Yeah. It's funny because the series it paid more attention to Kite Man trying to show his parents that he was like dating someone who they would approve of. That was the bigger thing, that like, I need you to show this and approve to you, where the actual queer relationship, they're like, this is normal. This is what we're going to kind of point to. And I like that because it's showing that we can treat all of this as normal, but like sometimes this means more to someone than the queer relationship is just an afterthought. Like, yeah, they're just that's a normal relationship, just like everybody the hell else.
Yeah.
I dug that.
Speaking of Kite Man, I'm curious, my friend really wants Kite Man to be gay. And he was like, Kite Man has a really gay energy. I was like, I can see that completely, and I don't think that they would take it in that direction, just because that would be like I think maybe overkill. But I do really like thinking of him that way. Because just the costume alone.
It's very homo. Yeah, no, I get it.
I could see them doing a storyline where he's at least like faking being gay to try to make them jealous and be like, see, I did the same thing you did.
I did what you guys did.
Gold and I are queer together now. Take that, Ivy. I could see them doing this weird like jealousy arc, and I would be here for it.
Because I think we all love Kite Man. Like, we don't want him with Ivy, but we still love watching him.
He went from a character that I was like, oh, this is just an afterthought, the joke character, to like, oh my God, he is amazing. And I want him to be in every episode in some way or another. I want him to be around.
Well, that was one of the most impressive parts of the show, was that all of the bit characters, Bane, Kite Man, Dr. Psycho even, had all of these moments where they made them three-dimensional characters. Nobody ever really was just a shtick. Yeah. Everyone got this, like, well, these are my parents, and it's really hard because I'm Kite Man, and I kind of suck, but, like, I'm doing my best.
Yeah.
Or you have all, like, this struggle with Bane to be accepted in the Legion of Doom. They don't really ever just make him, like,
poor Bane.
He really makes me laugh more than maybe anybody on the show.
Yeah. I also loved how the story gave us that, like, for Harley, Pamela was the coolest person in the room. Like, she was super cool. But then when Catwoman shows up on scene, Pamela drops down a tier, and she's not nearly as cool as Selena is. And that's fantastic.
Do you think, should I get a Cop Squad tattoo?
100%.
Yeah, I'm all about it. That whole sequence, man, it's so funny how they've adapted these characters. I feel like Harley, maybe more than any other comic book character, this might be my new, like, she's grown the most out of anyone. It's what I used to say about Spider-Man, where I was like, with Spider-Man, he's the only character that dates the Marvel continuity. He's 16, and then he ages. Everybody else is this weird static age. Harley is kind of that mark for the New 52 and everything else now. She's one of the only ones that started in a relationship as a sidekick, and then we saw her get out of that, and then we saw her learn her identity and her sexuality, and through the Suicide Squad and Rebirth and arrive at Ivy. And watching that adaptation here, because I don't know when everybody else, well, Jamie just said was with Birds of Prey, but I remember watching, like, the old Batman animated series and just being like, what a fun sidekick to the Joker. She's silly and she's got big hats on.
She was, yeah.
It's funny that you say this, because I agree completely. And my biggest worry, I am so concerned. I mean, I like James Gunn. I'm literally wearing a Guardian shirt. I'm worried that he's not going to carry over her character development from Birds of Prey. I am
too.
Very concerned, because that's all I care about. I do not care about a single other thing about that movie. I could care less.
Yeah, I hated the other one, but I'm with you. Like, I left Birds of Prey. I was like, cool, but wait, now we're giving this character to a different director. Are they not going to take her or handle her the same way as a female director did? Understanding where we need to have this character to, as much as I like James Gunn, and he is very inclusive, he's still a white male.
Yeah.
At the end of the day.
And I also feel like, Birds of Prey left off with her taking Cassandra Cain under her wing, and I have a feeling they're not even going to mention her.
It's going to get dropped off.
And that makes me, like, viscerally angry.
There were a lot of things after that movie where I was like, well, now what are we're going to go backwards now.
Yeah. and I even Suicide Squad could be the best movie ever made, and if they digress Harley, I will never watch it again.
Yeah.
Yeah, they now have to be, I don't want to say careful, but they have to be careful, because I don't really want to, it would be one thing if we had it in the way we have, like, the Harley Quinn show, where you could give me a 20-minute Suicide Squad episode where we're not really dealing with her character development. They're going to go on a mission. We're going to do some jokes. We're going to leave. And then in the next episode, we're back to the character development that I want. This is a giant tentpole movie, and I don't know what happens after that.
Yeah, so arguably could be the last time we see her on screen, for a while anyway. You don't want to mess up the trajectory that we've had with her from the crap fest that Suicide Squad was to what we got with Birds of Prey.
Yeah, they do so many great things with that character, and then every now and then they'll just be like, what if we dressed her up in almost nothing and just had her run around to be an action star? And you're like, well, that's not what I want.
Yeah.
I can get that from, like, old hip hop music videos. I don't need it here. So then we now see Gotham from this new perspective in the show. I loved that because you never really, when it's Batman, everyone's evil, everyone's seedy, everyone's bad, everyone wants to destroy it. And we're really seeing these weird undertones that we never do. The bars where they're getting their people, the fake talent agency where we're picking up people. We get into like branding of the Legion of Doom and how they handle their villainy. Did you guys, how did you feel about this new angle on this? You know, it's really a character in it, like New York and Sex in the City.
I have my whole DC background is the 89 90s movies. I don't like the Nolan movies. It's just not my style. I think Dark Knight is obviously a good film. It's just not my type of film. And so it's hard for me to answer that because it's not an area I know super well, but I think just as from a television, just general television perspective, it is really impressive the way that they, like you said, bring the whole city to life, and just the little details, like Jim Gordon squirting mayonnaise into his whiskey is the funniest and most disgusting thing I've ever seen in my life. And it just, the details like that make this show what it is.
Yeah, I'm a DC fan. Specifically, I mean, I'm a Batman and Green Lantern are like my bee's knees. I can go with those from top to bottom. And I love Batman Begins and Dark Knight. We've spoken ad nauseum about how I feel about Dark Knight Rises. Blake, we know how I don't particularly care about that film, but
not very good.
But overall, I love that. This world does a great job of creating Gotham and giving it color and light and giving it levels. Like, not all the bad guys are created equal. Some are higher up than others. But it also does a great job of taking the piss out of a lot of things that are just we hold so dear and hold up to this high standard that, like, when you really think about it, are very silly. And you're like, oh yeah, that's true. That is kind of ridiculous. And we talked about it before we got on mic. Just the whole Joker concept of, like, when he finds out who Batman is, he's like, I didn't want to know that. Like, I still wanted to play this back and forth game. And I love that. I was like, yes, that's who Joker is. You still get the concept of what Joker wants to do and his in and out, but you get it in a cartoon form. And I laughed hysterically at that.
Yeah, they answered. Oh, sorry, Jamie, go on.
I was just gonna say I love regular Joe Joker. That's what I call him. I think that because even Joker got to grow a little. Like at the end of season 2, even he's like trying to have this relationship work.
They had like a BFF friend, like with him and Harley, and I was like, and he was like, I want you to go love. Like, I want you to have what I'm doing over here. So yes, please. And even his joke off when she's being beat up by Ivy, who's taken over. He's like, yeah, we had some violent matches too when we were in love. I was like, that's his version of what he sees. Like, I want her to still have that. I was like, oh, that's fantastic. Mm-hmm. But yes, Joker does grow in this more than I think he's ever done in any film stuff we've seen.
No, well, we usually keep these characters, specifically Batman and Joker, very static. And I think it's because they're supposed to represent things, order and chaos and the line and da-da-da-da-da-da. We get it. And I think one of the things I really liked about this show was how it took all of that stuff seriously. So you still had these things of, well, the Joker loves Batman. He might be in love with Batman.
I think he's definitely in love.
100%.
Yeah. He doesn't want to know his identity. He just wants to play this game. It's not about beating Batman. It's about like all of that was baked into the DNA of this show. And I like my Gotham somewhere in between Schumacher and Burton's way of doing it. I love Batman Begins and The Dark Knight, and I'm from Chicago. Making Gotham just Chicago to me was like, yep, nope, it's Chicago. Cool. I want some Frankenstein sets. I want Freeze to have his weird ice place. I want Ivy to have an overgrown apartment. I want the comic book colorfulness in it. You can still make a dark story that with big, heavy themes and have it in there. If anything, this show shows you that you can juggle a ton of important themes and ideas and have fun and be colorful. I don't know why we somewhere decided that like Batman needs to be diluted of all color and life. It has to be very serious. And it's like, well, that man's frozen and he shoots ice beams, and
Right.
that's a living bat that flies
This
around and attacks
guy
him.
just asks riddles all the
He
time.
adopts children and makes them fight crime. It's kind of fucked up. So it's nice having a show that can both take its source material seriously and also kind of kick it in the ass a little bit and be like, no, we're going to play with some of the themes. We're even going to play with like the toxicity of some of the fandom, and we're going to show you that reflection. Like, this is how you look when you're streaming it with your Last Jedi shirt.
Oh, God, that was so
perfect.
good. And they almost I believe they almost took those out. I think the showrunners thought they were going to be made to take them out, and they were surprised they got to stay. My thing about that scene is I think that the two guys' shirts should be switched, because the release the Snyder guy is worse, and I think TLJ people are way worse than Snyder Cut people.
I'm a fan of the Last Jedi, but I hate to say anything about that film because I think the fans on either side of that are just so viscerally ugly.
I mean, I have a giant Last Jedi tattoo, and
yes.
And I the people, I just don't understand like the hate for that. It's fine if you don't like it, but the I tweeted like a positive thing about it recently, and it got like 150 responses in 30 minutes. Yeah. I didn't even read them because
there are a lot of people who just actively just hate on that film. And Blake and I went to see the last one in theaters together, and when they just sideline Rose and the way that she did it, I was just like, yeah, fuck everybody.
I'm glad Terrence was there with me during that premiere, because when they were like, Ray, you're related to Palpatine, I audibly at a full theater with children was like, what the fuck? Come on.
I didn't hate Tross, and that's only because I just love Star Wars more than anything in this world, and I'm like easy. But the Palpatine thing and the Rose thing are the two that the Rose sidelining especially. But Palpatine, it was just like Rian Johnson did such a good. It was so the You're Nobody thing was really powerful,
fantastic. Yeah,
and I loved having Palpatine back. I loved that, but he didn't need to be related to her.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, look, we could talk about that all day.
Yes.
And I might.
Sidetrack.
So I want to then talk about, because we all like this world, we all like this show. Do you guys have a standout character, or was there a character you were a fan of that they've changed a bit in this show? And do you like that change? I'll start with Terrence, because I know his favorite villain is Freeze. And if we're getting into the spoilers, they took that character and they 180'd it.
I love Freeze so much. And I love how, like, the very beginning, because the thing with Freeze has always been, he is a villain, but he doesn't really fit into the criminal world that they have immediately. And the first joke that they have with him is he's sitting there and they're like, you're part of the criminal mastermind. He's like, I'm not a criminal. I'm only here to fund doing research for Nora. And I said, well, how do you fund that? And he's like, oh, I'm part of the criminal mastermind. Like, I was like, that's fantastic, because literally he is, when you think about it, at the end of the day, yes, at the very bare bones, he is right there with them. He's my favorite character because he deals a lot with sympathy and empathy for he's doing it for his wife, and I love how that becomes the precipice of why this whole relationship thing happens in the second act of the second season. But they really do take the piss out of Mr. Freeze 100%.
Are you excited to see a living Mrs. Nora. Freeze, though?
Yeah, I love Nora being around. I absolutely love that Rachel Dratch is the voice, because I was like, oh, this is fantastic. Like, I love her. I love her trying to get it on with Ares. Anytime she's like, look, my guy is gone. I've been in ice this whole time. I'm banging anything that moves. Let me get Ares. Yeah, it's great.
For that question, like I said, I admittedly I didn't really read DC, so most of my references are the movies. But I will say I have a lot of friends that especially my job, I work for comicbook.com, so it's a little embarrassing to be like, I don't read DC comics when that's literally part of my job. But I know my friends love what they have done with Clayface, and that's partially like I'm a theater kid at heart, and a lot of my friends are theater kids, and watching Clayface just be like, that's his whole thing, is he's just trying to do theater.
Super theater on all the time.
That is I think the best thing that they did in terms of with a character.
Yeah, it's so funny that they did that because we did before Joker came out a whole like other villains we'd want to see in these solo movies. And my big one was give me Clayface as the failed actor. And when they did this show, I was like, son of a bitch, they did it better than I ever could have imagined.
Yeah.
For me, it really was Gordon. This like character that we always see as like serious and on top of it, and he's the best, and he's part of an organization that's corrupt, and watching him go through completely falling to the point where he's in his daughter's dorm room. It's an Arrested Development episode. Like taking back his entire police station and having this relationship with an arm, and him trying so hard to be Batman's friend and like reach out and be like, Batman, my wife is cheating on me. It's an emergency.
And Batman not caring at all. I don't care. I do not care.
That's not what we're here for, Gilbert. I thought what they did with him, because again, it's not really like, it's not character suicide of somebody that we know. They're not ruining this character. They're taking all of the things that we love about him and making it, to me, almost more real. You now have a detective who's so tired and he's trying so hard, and his only friend is a superhero who does not want to talk to him. Who does though? Because that's Batman's background, is him and Jim on his computer.
Yeah. I mean, there's a bunch of characters that I would not have paid attention to. Frank, Pamela's pet flower is amazing. There are so many things that he says that I'm like, oh, that's exactly how I would say them, and verbatim. I was like, JB Smoove kills that, and I was like, yes, I want you to be voiced as the sidekick of everybody, just like the little shoulder conscience that's always there. Like, he's great. And we've talked about it before. Wanda Sykes' run is just stupid. Like, it's stunning how great that character is with the fables and all that. I was like, I want more of that. Fortunately, the character's gone, but like, she kills it when she's on scene. Oh,
no one's ever really gone.
That's true.
No one's. These are comic book rules. It doesn't. We burned down the whole city and had a Hot Wheels roller coaster ride for her highway.
Yeah.
We could do whatever we want. Do you guys have a favorite episode of the show that just stood out to you?
I mean, the first kiss was like a big one, because the episode's great. The George Lopez cameo is so great.
I was like, what is going on right now?
I'm Harley Quinn and I kiss people. It's what I do.
It was just so satisfying. Harley was about to sacrifice herself for Poison Ivy selflessly, and Poison Ivy wouldn't let it happen, and she grabbed her, and the adrenaline, and like the fact that they kiss each other, and then when they pull apart, and the shock on their faces, because it was completely like, it was like visceral. It had nothing, they never thought about it, and I love that. It just felt, it was so satisfying to see that happen and have it happen that way. So it's probably the kiss for me.
It's funny because I obviously, as a Freeze fan, I would my natural instincts to go to that one, but I actually think it's the Themyscira episode when they go for the bachelorette party.
That's good.
I think that episode is phenomenal, and from just the consistent visual joke of the invisible plane and van that just birds just keep dying into, which is great. And then just the Themyscira being now a resort that people are paying for, just to the emotional stuff that is going on with Harley and Pamela, and you're sitting there and like, oh my God, they get drunk and they get into their actual inner desires, and they realize that like, oh crap, we probably shouldn't have done this. Meanwhile, Selena's like, I know what you guys are in love with each other. I don't care. I don't want to be a part of any of this, but that's what's happening here. And then just to end with her just sitting on the plane bawling when she goes back to Kite Man, I was like, oh my God, this episode has everything that gets me as a person, the highs, lows, relationship, love. That is to me the perfect episode that for this series.
Yeah, it's so counterproductive of me to say, but my favorite comedies have the most serious moments.
Oh yeah.
Your Scrubs, your BoJack Horseman, some of the best Simpson episodes are the serious ones. This show to me hit all of that.
Agreed.
But that being said, I think my favorite, I don't know if it's my favorite episode, but my favorite bit is when 100% when Dr. Psycho just calls Wonder Woman the C word. I had to pause because I like looked at my friend, because this whole show, I cannot explain in an audio format my giddiness when I first watched this whole show. And I just kept looking at my friend who had seen it, being like, is Superman going to show up? Is Wonder Woman going to show up? Are they going to do all of these things? And I just want to see what they do with it. And like, as soon as I asked that, he pointed at the screen and Wonder Woman showed up and we just call her the C word. And I was like, this is amazing because it's so funny. You're taking one of the most important female superheroes of all time and doing this. And then you're doing something with it. And you're really being like, look, we can't have that kind of speech. Even the Legion of Doom won't accept this. And these are problematic men. And this is how they act. And they need to accept and understand who they are. And we did it with Dr. Psycho, who's already like small and pointless. And no one really likes him, but he thinks he's the greatest thing in the world. And I was like, this is exactly how all of these Twitter people are who do this. They've really nailed it.
It's funny that I like that you picked that, because I really like that he kind of became the big bad of season 2, because there's just really no redeeming him. I mean, my favorite trope is when a bad boy tries to be good. I mean, give me your Jamie Lannisters all day. But Dr. Psycho is, you're not coming back from that. And he never got better. He never tried to grow. And I'm glad that they didn't try to force him to be on the team, because Harley's growing. And she even says at the end of season 2, she's like, I don't think I'm a villain anymore.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that they let Dr. Psycho just go full bad, because what else are you going to do?
And I just love that they even still, they called out him using that word, because even Darkseid was like, no, you called Wonder Woman that very vulgar term, and that's not acceptable.
I don't think anything will be better than Lex Luthor standing in front of a camera saying this is not our brand of evil. And they just kept laying it on. They like imply that he says something to Black Manta, and you're like, this guy is just the worst. But people like this exist, and it gave the show that like weird tangible quality of like, look how extreme and hilarious this is, but also it's very real, especially in this community. But like even the worst of the worst don't want to do it. And having him be the big, awful bad guy of season 2, I thought was just the most logical place to go, because there was no fixing him. It bummed me out that he was working with the Riddler, because I love the Riddler. And I was like, he's better than this.
I also love Jim Rash. And Jim Rash's voice in the Riddler is I'm on a big Community kick right now. I'm watching it for the second time in quarantine.
It's a great show.
And I just like get comfort hearing his voice.
Oh, he has a very comforting voice. It's amazing how many people they pulled out. Buster Bluth for Dr. Psycho and the Dean of Community for the Riddler to play these villains, and they're almost invisible in the show. Like, you recognize everybody's voice, but they're all doing it so well.
Yeah.
That I'm like, oh man, they're really challenging my these are very good actors.
And Tudyk is destroying it as the Joker. Like, I was like, oh Jesus, this is phenomenal. You're doing a great job.
Like how many voiceover things he does, and it is like his bread and butter these days.
Yeah.
And I just love watching all of the people from Big Bang Theory leave that show and do these incredible things.
And I love that Kaylee is EP on this too. I was like, that's fucking awesome.
Watching Hollywood this year, I was like, man, these guys were really good, and now they've got all that Big Bang money. There's no stopping them.
Yeah.
I think that brings us, I want to talk about the app a little bit. Do we think that having it on All Access maybe hurt it a little bit in the beginning? Was it too inaccessible, or is it not a great idea to put an R-rated thing on an app? What do we think?
I don't know if the R-rated, it's because Titans also super violent. Like, that's a very hyper violent show. Robin's taking out kneecaps consistently throughout that show. So I don't know if the violence is, but I do think that like there's a new window open. Like I don't think people actually had the DC universe. There were parts of the country that did not have access to the DC universe. Like Titans was given to Netflix in other parts of the country just because that's the way that the DC universe app worked. I just don't think people knew it. Like I personally feel that, especially seeing how people are responding to it now that they're seeing it on HBO Max, I feel like Harley Quinn would have already had a season 3 greenlit had it been on HBO Max from the jump. I think DC Universe was so small that people weren't actively being able to see this. People just didn't know this fucking the show existed. But I think now that's changing. And I think that's for the better because I think HBO Max just reaches more people. DC Universe, part of it is probably also because of branding. DCU had sort of lost a lot of steam with people with back-to-back cinematic failures that I think the DC brand as a whole was kind of starting to get tarnished. I don't think rolling out a whole new streaming device was the timing wise the best thing to do, and then you launching with shows that didn't really move the needle that much. Although I think if you saw Harley Quinn, it would have. I just don't think you're not going to launch a network with what they started with.
I literally never heard of Harley Quinn until I was actively searching for Harley Quinn content, and I literally work for comicbook.com, and I had never heard of the show. And so I had no interest in DC Universe. I actually Doom Patrol is my next show. I'm gonna watch after Umbrella Academy.
I'm with you. That's my set. The next one to watch. Too, yeah.
I just want to see Brendan Fraser play a robot. That's like my. So I was like, 7-day trial, and then I watched the whole first season in a day, and then I got lucky for season 2. Then I'm like, this is now my beat at work. I'm writing about this now. Thank you.
I'll take this one.
Yeah. So then I got screeners, so I don't need DC Universe anymore because that's the one thing I need it for. So yeah, it's a little too niche.
Yeah.
I think now that it's on HBO Max, if people can find it and they can get the word out, I just want a season 3 so bad.
Bad. And so Patrick Schumacher, the showrunner, he's part of DC Fandom, the upcoming virtual con. But I saw him on Twitter literally yesterday say, because somebody got excited, "You're going to be there. That means confirmation season 3." And he was like, "I'm going to be honest, we haven't gotten picked up yet." So my hopes of a season 3 announcement at DC Dome has plummeted. And it's like, it can't be that expensive to make that show.
Well, you can't be. Right, I would imagine. And I would imagine now in this world, you would want to do animation more. So like, look, we can get this done without having to have these people around each other. This makes just more sense to just do this.
And this was the closest we got. I saw a tweet today from a friend of mine and a friend of the show, Haley Mancini, she was basically like, why is adult animation just comedy? Whereas like my fun animated romance or drama or something else, that I was like, this is about as close as we've gotten. Mm-hmm. But it's still a super heightened, violent, R-rated comedy, but they've boiled in this relationship that I'm now just so invested in.
Yeah.
They did a good enough job, I thought, with that ending of having them ride off and question it, that I'm like, if this is the end,
at least we're satisfied.
Yeah.
It's a good, satisfying ending. I do love the question mark. It's like, hey, if they give us another chance, we can come back up and do something else with it. But I do love that, like, this does feel like it could be an in for this version. I want to hear Haley. I want to see her do this more often. Like, I don't want this to stop being the Harley that I get in animated form.
Is there anything you want to see from season 3 if we do it?
I mean, obviously my answer is I want to see their relationship develop, because the showrunners have said if they get a season 3, they're not going to break them up.
Which is the huge thing that TV shows do.
It sucks. And people have trouble sometimes making a relationship work once it's like the Jim and Pam effect. Right. But it's frustrating because like people in the real life have relationships, and you don't like, that's just what happens in reality. And so and especially like queer, like right now actually we have really great queer women representation on Winona Earp, with that it's one of the best relationships on TV, and we get to, that's a really good arc, so we're getting more of them. But I mean, animated wise, no, I can't. Right. I mean, well, maybe Steven Universe, but that's different too. But yeah, I'd like to see how they navigate their relationship. that's my answer.
Yeah. I definitely don't want them to tear them apart. Like, when the showrunner has, like, I looked at the same, like, they're actively saying that that's not going to happen. So I think it would be cool, while within the entire world of the DC world and doing all these ins and outs, that we still just have them go through the pitfalls of establishing a solid relationship, because that shit alone is fun. Like, you can just like go through the normalcies or the everydayness of what relationships go through, like shopping or taking out, like all of that, but put that in the Harley Quinn Pamela version of that, and I think you could have an entire, like, another season of that. That would just be fun to watch.
Because so many shows do fall into that trap of making, and I mean this in 100 different ways, actually. They make relationships very binary. It's either good and we're together, or it's hard and we're not. So it would be fun to watch a non-binary relationship go through then things of like, oh, well, it's hard, but we're mixing it and we're now learning if are we villains or are we heroes? What are we really doing? What are our priorities? We've now dealt with her individual identity and her sexuality. So now it really is like, that's the next big, like, am I a hero or a villain or something in between? What I really want, and it's such a long shot, but it's because I just read it. It's the Heroes in Crisis comic where they have a hero sanctuary that's therapy for everybody. And Ivy sneaks Harley in so she can deal with the Joker. And then a bunch of people die, and it becomes a big whodunit with Harley in the middle. And I'm just like, I need this. I want to see this character deal with therapy. I want to see her maybe be framed for something she didn't do while she's trying to prove that she can be a hero. It puts the heroes in a weird place of, we had this secret therapy place and all these people died there, and all of because we haven't really dealt with like Batman being an asshole. Because there's always that fun stuff of like, oh, well, the Justice League doesn't really trust him because like that dude always has kryptonite and a way to beat us, and he's always telling us he doesn't.
All of our weaknesses at hand for whenever, for reasons.
I still want to see, there's more villains I want to see. I want to get Booster Gold in there. I want to get Mad Hatter in there. They've now showed me a version of the DC universe that I love, and I'm like, well, now I want to see everything. We didn't do enough with Aquaman. Do more with Aquaman. We haven't seen Shazam. Get Shazam in there.
Yeah.
Bring back the Robins.
Neither of the Green Lanterns just have been there as cameos. They really haven't been around.
And we haven't even talked about Batgirl. I need more of Batgirl.
I love that she got like basically a 2 to 3 episode arc in the middle of this show. They're like, this show does a great job of giving all the female characters a moment to shine. Because DC has always been, for the most part, has been very male heavy. And this series, from top to bottom, even though it's still Harley's show, has taken times to like, all right, cool, Harley is still here, but let's give Barbara a moment. Let's give Selena a moment. Like, let's give these other females that we aren't always actively paying attention to, let's give these guys a moment, because they are just as important as the rest of the guys.
Yeah, and there's nothing else like this, right? And when I finished watching it, I very much was like, well, I need something. I guess the closest thing would be this animated Deadpool we never got, or these other like animated Marvel stories. But I am now just like, start fucking around with the continuity more. Let's get weird with everything. We don't need to keep doing it the same way we've been doing it. We've now shown that we can do these different points of view and we can get all these different voices in. And I just need season 3.
I want to see more Bane. Like, we need more Bane.
Bane, I'm so glad, because I mean, the start of the second season had Harley wiping out a lot of villains, and I was like, please don't take out Bane. Please don't take out Bane.
We need Bane.
Yes.
I've never seen a show, and Game of Thrones doesn't count because I didn't care about those characters. I've never seen a show just slaughter people I care about so haphazardly. Like, the Penguin's dead. The Joker's gone.
Yeah.
There was a part of me that's like, they're going to kill Batman. They're going to kill him. They're going to shoot him in the head.
Yeah, no, it was rapidly going through some of those villains at the top of the second season. I was like, oh, crap. One, where is this going? Like, we're getting rid of these characters so quickly. How do we stop this to continue this season on? And then you're like, all right, we're going to get the relationship stuff. But two, you're like, wait a minute, guys. I care about some of those guys.
Well, it just shows you how deep the bench is. But it's like, we've wiped the floor with everybody, but we haven't done anything with the ventriloquist or Man-Bat. And I'm like, yes, let's do this.
You have some other ones still there.
let's have more of this weird Tim Burton cameo that came out of nowhere that Clayface wanted to perform for. Yes.
And how cool is that his song being like the montage of them driving off? I was like, oh,
that was beautiful.
This is gorgeous. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so funny watching a show where I'm like, everyone's so supportive. And most shows, people are assholes to each other. It's so weird watching a show where I'm like, what a bunch of healthy, supportive people, and they're doing crime, but it's fine. You know, if you think caring about the environment is crime, then I guess I'm doing crime.
I saw a really good tweet about Ivy. It's like, she's just killing billionaires who are messing up the environment. Go, girl. You're not a villain.
Yeah.
We love you.
Well, that was my favorite point of view that she had, was everything with her character was like, yeah, no, I'm just helping plants. I'm not like the Legion of Doom. And it's so funny because that's another obvious thing from the movies and everything else, the show. And you're like, oh yeah, she's not that bad. We just spent a long time making her also be like, well, she's a seductress and she's going to make you fall in love with her. But really, she's just an environmentalist.
Yeah.
I learned something. I didn't like when she says that it's a myth to wash out your recyclables. I didn't know that.
I know. And now whenever I wash out my yogurt cups, I'm like, damn it, I'm wasting water.
There's a hilarious joke. My wife was not watching this with me. I was watching, but she could hear the volume, and she was in this room while I was in there watching it. And like that happened. She's been the one who adamantly has told me to always wash out my cans and all the time. And I was like, haha, you are wrong. This cartoon says it's 5.
My friend Jake was like, is that true? And I was like, Poison Ivy said it. It has to be true.
Cartoons never lie. We learned that when Nancy Reagan made them all cross over to start the war on drugs, and Michelangelo told us that Pop was wrong. Picked the most stone turtle to be part of that
Mikey.
crossover.
You're high now telling me this, but that's fine.
Look, I get it. I've also done things to be like, no, don't drink the way I do. It's you'll be fine, but you won't be great. Yeah, I loved it. Does anybody have anything else they want to add, or we can start wrapping up?
Nothing other than look, if you haven't seen this, as I know it was on a smaller streaming service before, and if you have HBO Max, you owe it to yourself to go ahead and crank. I say, look, just watch the first 3 episodes. If it's not for you, you'll know at that point in time. But watch the first 3 episodes. You're not going to stop after that point.
I knew within the first 5 minutes.
100. I'm with you. I'm in that same boat. Like as soon as the boat,
but you're right.
I was like, I'm done. I'm in.
Yeah, I think that if you'll know early on if it's your brand.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right, because it is. I had somebody call me today who just watched it, and they're like, well, man, we could never show this to children. I was like, well, why would you show it to children? It is an R-rated. You know what? I don't care.
It doesn't equate children.
Look, I worked at a GameStop. I get it. I sold Grand Theft Auto to a lot of small kids, but I always warned them they shouldn't.
You should not be doing this.
The whole thing, but come on. Are we still in an animation world where we think it's for kids because it's a cartoon? We've been doing this for a while now.
Yeah.
But it's great. Everyone should go watch it. I think if you're a fan of this character and some of the best versions of this character. And that's our show, guys. Thank you so much for listening. As always, you can leave us a review on iTunes. Give us one of those 5 stars. Oh, the other ones don't work. It's a new problem that iTunes has. 4 and under, they don't do anything. So you got to do the 5. You can follow the show at Hollywood ADI. We're on Instagram at Hollywood Already Did It, and on Facebook at facebook.com/group/Hollywood Already Did It podcast. I'm at, as always, Blake. Terrence is at Terrence Tatum. Jamie is at Jamie Cinematics. Great. That was the other thing I meant to ask before we started, but I remembered and we got it right.
Nailed it.
Terrence and I do another show called One More Drink, where we talk about whatever we want. I do another show called How Do You Figure about podcast collecting. It's a podcast about action figure collecting. Jamie, where can the fine people find your great work and all the things you do?
Oh boy. Well, you can use comicbook.com. I got lots of stuff there. I make a lot of BuzzFeed quizzes too for BuzzFeed. So if you want to take some which Succession character you quizzes, you can do that. But it's all, just go to my Twitter. I'm all about the Twitter.
Those quizzes have really defined me as a person now. I know what kind of
I've learned much about myself.
I understand who I should vote for based on different fruits that I would have selected. It all tracks. All right, guys. Thank you so much for listening, and we will hopefully see you next week. Stay safe and all that jazz.